What if none of this was accidental? Not in a movie villain way. No secret meetings or flashing red buttons. Just patterns. Outcomes. The same results showing up again and again in different places under different names. At some point, coincidence stops being a satisfying explanation, and you start to feel that quiet tension of something not adding up. You've probably felt it already. The constant confusion, the exhaustion that never quite lifts, the feeling that everything is urgent, everything is loud, and nothing ever really resolves. You're told it's just the way the world is now, that this is normal. But if it were truly random, it wouldn't be so consistent. The same emotions, the same divisions, the same distractions, over and over again. When I say this, I'm talking about the repeating pattern of confusion, distraction, division, and exhaustion that keeps showing up across modern life. Up until now, this channel explored psychology, health, and how the mind works. And that still matters. But lately, the question has shifted. Instead of only asking what's happening inside the mind, it becomes impossible not to notice what's shaping the world around it. Patterns that don't need force to work. Patterns that function quietly, through repetition, timing, and fatigue. This isn't about telling you what to believe, and it's not about handing you answers wrapped in certainty. It's about noticing outcomes. Because when the same results keep appearing across different systems, different platforms, and different parts of life, the most important question isn't what they tell you is happening. It's what keeps happening anyway. And once you start looking at it that way, the world begins to feel a little less random. When you start paying attention, it's the consistency that stands out. Not just that things go wrong, but how they go wrong. The same kinds of conflicts keep surfacing, the same emotional spikes, the same cycle of panic, argument, distraction, and forgetting. Different topics rotate through, but the outcome never really changes. People stay tired. People stay divided. People stay overwhelmed. If this were random, you'd expect variation. You'd expect some resolution, some learning curve, some clear improvement. But instead, it feels like the system resets just enough to keep moving, without ever actually fixing anything. The noise changes, but the pressure stays. And after a while, it stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling managed. This is usually the point where people pull back from the thought. Because once you notice a pattern, the next question becomes uncomfortable. Who benefits from things staying this way? Not who's to blame, not who's evil. Just who gains when people are too distracted to slow down, too exhausted to question, and too busy reacting to look up. And that's where this channel starts to shift. We're not here to chase headlines or argue theories. We're here to observe outcomes, to look at what keeps repeating across different systems and ask why the same conditions keep being produced. Because before you can understand intent, you have to be honest about results. And the results have been remarkably consistent. Here's something most people never stop to consider. Confusion is far more effective than control. You don't need force when people are unsure. You don't need rules when people are arguing. And you don't need obedience when people are already policing themselves through fear, exhaustion, and social pressure. A confused population doesn't organize. It reacts. It chases the next headline. It fights sideways with each other instead of questioning the structure above them. When clarity disappears, people fill the gap with emotion. And emotion is easy to steer. Not because someone tells you where to go, but because your nervous system is already moving before your mind catches up. You've probably noticed how often you're pushed to feel something before you're given time to understand it. Urgency arrives first. Context comes later, if it comes at all. And by the time the full picture emerges, attention has already shifted to the next crisis. Nothing resolves. Nothing settles. The cycle just resets with new names and new faces. This isn't about a single group pulling strings behind a curtain. It's about systems that reward certain outcomes. Systems that benefit when people stay distracted, divided, and too mentally drained to slow down. When you look at it that way, the constant confusion stops feeling like a failure of the system and starts looking like exactly what keeps it running. There's a moment when something shifts, and it doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. You start noticing timing instead of just content. You notice how certain stories appear right when attention begins to drift, how outrage shows up on schedule, how fear is introduced just as people start asking better questions. Once you see that rhythm, it's hard to ignore. You also start noticing your own reactions, how quickly your body tightens, how fast your mind wants to take a side. And then, something new happens. You pause. Not because you're apathetic, but because you're aware. You realize you're being invited to react before you've had a chance to think. And for the first time, you don't automatically accept the invitation. That pause changes everything. You begin asking different questions. Not, what am I supposed to think about this? But, why am I being shown this right now? Why this story? Why this emotion? Why this level of urgency? Why today? The focus shifts from the message itself to the timing and the effect it produces. And once that shift happens, the world doesn't look the same anymore. You stop moving in sync with every emotional wave. You stop assuming that what's loud is important, or that what's repeated is true. You start looking at patterns instead of chasing moments. And that's when you realize you're no longer fully inside the system. You're observing it. Once you reach this point, there's no going back to the way you saw things before. You don't need answers right away. You don't need a final explanation. Curiosity becomes enough. Observation becomes a skill. You start to understand that the rabbit hole doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with noticing. And noticing changes in how everything feels. This channel is no longer about fixing yourself or optimizing your life. It's about stepping back and examining the systems that shape the world you're moving through, quietly, carefully, without rushing to conclusions. Because the moment you stop reacting on command is the moment real understanding becomes possible. If this way of looking at things resonates with you, if you felt that something deeper is at play but haven't had the language for it, then this channel is for you. We're going to keep pulling at these threads, not to tell you what to believe, but to help you see what's repeating, what's consistent, and what might be intentional. So, if you want to keep exploring these patterns, take a moment to subscribe. Not for notifications, not for algorithms, but so you don't have to go back to watching the world the same way you did before. This is Meta Rabbit Hole, and this is where the questions really begin.